This is More Than Before with Nathan Cook.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show today. I am incredibly excited and honored to have our next guest. He is an extremely successful business coach and trainer. He has trained leaders all over the world, and one specific location I'm actually really curious about, which we'll get into a little bit later, the Arctic Circle. He's an amazing dad, awesome husband, married for a long time. And he manages to keep himself in shape all of these years. He is an athlete. I would call him an athlete. He's finished 7 half Ironman, which is insane because I don't think I could finish one even in my sleep. He's done a bunch of distance runs. Like this guy is absolutely amazing, not only in work, but also in life. But one of the things I love about him so much is he is a man of character. I am really excited to have him on the show. David McGlennon, welcome. How are you doing today, brother?
Hey man, I'm well, Nathan. It's so great to be here. Man, I hope I live up to that great intro.
Oh, I know you will. You know, I keep hearing this from people. I think maybe I need to lower expectations for people when I'm reading off their pedigrees, but I don't know if I could do that. It's interesting when you are in the moment and actually working on your business, working on your career, working on your life, you don't actually see the progression. And so
yeah, it's true.
We don't actually take that much time to go back and look at all of these amazing feats that we've actually accomplished. And so it's really cool to have someone actually from the outside perspective to be able to say, wow, this is actually quite amazing. In terms of this going to the Arctic Circle, first of all, has to be absolutely cold. But
yeah,
what in the world were you doing there?
Training leaders. Leaders are everywhere.
All the SEALs needed some leaders up there. No.
They did. Yeah, no, there's a mining company up there that is mining iron ore in the Arctic Circle. It's actually the purest iron ore in the world. The company that runs the mine wanted to be able to train their leaders in some safety leadership as well as intercultural leadership, because there are two kinds of people up there. There are the natives, the Inuit, and then there are what they call the Southerners, anybody outside of the Arctic Circle. And so the company wanted to be able to, all the Southerners. Yeah. So they wanted to integrate, the two groups of people, teach them leadership, especially around safety. I had the opportunity to go up and be a trainer up there. It was really quite an amazing experience because just getting there was an adventure. We flew into Canada to Montreal, and then we took a charter jet. I mean, it looked just like a commercial jet, it was like a 737 or something. And we flew up to the next spot where we had to pick some people up that were going all the way up to the mine. So we flew for about 3 hours, landed on this like really little strip, picked up some passengers, and then went up another 2 hours. And when we finally got there, I got off of the airplane, and I looked at the person I was with. So Diane Dick. Do you know Diane? Yeah. So she was. This was actually her client. So I got to kind of ride along with her client. So she and I were going up there together. And as I looked at her, basically I was going to say, man, it's cold, because there's no jet bridge there. You get off the plane on the steps and then you walk indoors. I looked over this way and literally my contacts were freezing on my eye and my eyelashes were freezing. It's like 40 below zero is cold, man. It's just, there's no two ways about it. So anyway, it was an amazing experience. And you just had to, like, there were so many precautions too. Like they had to check your gloves. They had to check your boots to make sure that they were like rated to like 50 or 60 below zero and all that kind of stuff. So on top of the great privilege of sharing leadership concepts with that team up there, it was really cool to be able to experience the Arctic, and because I had never done it before. And so it was really cool. Yeah, it was a really cool experience.
Well, it's definitely a different kind of cold, but I mean, even for you, so Pittsburgh is known for some cold weather. You know, and so it's kind of funny to think about this. You thought you knew cold, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in the Arctic Circle, and they're like, "Oh, look, a Southerner! Like he thinks he knows cold, right?"
Yeah,
that's kind of like someone from Oregon coming out to visit you, and you're like, "Oh yeah, you think you know cold? You don't know cold
You
yet.
don't know cold yet. Yeah, I will tell you, man, this was taking cold to a whole nother level, man. A whole nother level. Oh, it was insane. It was
Oh my
insane.
gosh.
It was definitely an adventure.
I would imagine it would be. I would love to do that someday. I don't know if my wife would ever let me go. I'm curious from your perspective, growing up there, was it always harsh and cold and like you had to watch your back all the time? What was it like growing up? I don't know. That's I for some reason I just see like kids on the street snapping their fingers walking through, like
so
looking
funny.
at you.
Yeah, we weren't it wasn't Greece or anything like that, you know.
But what was life like growing up there? Like, did you have a lot of friends? Big family? What was that like?
So I grew up in a place called Fort Wayne, Indiana. So not far from here, about 5 hours drive from here. And it's roughly the same kind of a weather. Smaller town, not much, but smaller. So I moved here when I was 40. So I don't have like, growing up stories here. I have growing up stories, back in Fort Wayne. But the Pittsburgh is really, really kind of interesting because even when we moved here, the one thing that we noticed is that people everywhere, they'll talk to you. Like they don't care who you are, or, where you came from. You're standing in line at the grocery store, for the deli, and, people are just going to be talking to you like, hey, how do you like that ham? Is that pretty good? And it was just kind of the way they were. And they also have some idiosyncrasies. Like the first time the guy behind the deli called my wife Hun, she was like, wait a second here. She was like taken aback. Like, I'm not your Hun. But it's like everybody calls you Hun, or that was a big
Hun
one.
Or sweetie or darling or
yeah. They have their own like little idiosyncratic words as well. So if you ever want to know what kind of like a stereotypical Pittsburgher is like, go on to Instagram and look up Pittsburgh Dad. Pittsburgh Dad. I'm serious. He's got the accent. He's got the way they talk. I mean, it's amazing. He's hilarious too.
It's interesting about community though, because community is hard to find nowadays. I love that there is a community that's there. Because, growing up in Oregon here, there's been community all around. Like I remember going out and seeing neighbors and talking to people. And my dad was always the person that was really engaging with other folks. But it's fascinating to me because, I traveled to other states and I start meeting people and they think I'm crazy for talking to people in line. They think I'm crazy for asking like, hey, what's the best donut in this donut shop? Right. Like they look at you like, you don't ask those questions. Why are you talking to me? I don't know you. And I'm thinking, how do we build a relationship if you don't talk to me? And they look at me like, why do I want a relationship with you? So
that's funny.
I think it is really interesting, this kind of sense of community. Was that something that kind of drew you to Pittsburgh, or like, was that something that you found a lot growing up, a lot of community?
Yeah. Where I grew up in Fort Wayne, I grew up in, a relatively small Midwestern town. And, I grew up in an era where we played out until it got dark and even sometimes past dark, and nobody really worried. And my mom and dad didn't know necessarily where we were, but we weren't going very far because, we were on a bike. So community was really important. And when we moved here, what was really interesting is we lost all that community. Like I mean, we didn't know anybody. I knew one person. So I moved here because of needing a job. Part of my story is that I was a partner with my dad for almost 19 years, and he died suddenly of a heart attack. And when he died, it was one of those things that I lost not only my dad, but I lost my business partner. And quite frankly, I lost a really good friend as well. And so it really started wearing on me because we had a small office at the time. We had just been building a consulting firm. And then on top of that, the company that we were consulting for, essentially the CEO and the CFO were embezzling funds. And so long story short, the company shut down. There were lawsuits everywhere, and it was just a disaster. And so the stress of that, I think, was one thing that led my dad to, have a heart attack, although he also didn't take good care of himself physically. It was one of the things that really, I think, was at the the foundation of why I wanted to be in shape and really made a huge commitment to my health. So I moved to Pittsburgh because I wanted to get away from an empty office, and I was just looking for a job because our income stopped when that company defaulted. We didn't have any more income, and so I started networking, and through that process, had an opportunity to come to Pittsburgh. I was in the insurance business, so I came to work for a large insurance broker here in Pittsburgh, and that was the only people that I knew. I knew the office mate next to me and my boss, and that was pretty much it. So all that to say, we lost the community that we had back in Indiana, and we had to recreate that. And it took a little while, but through just really being very persistent and, just I think too, all of the things with the kids, having, 5 kids, you have a lot of opportunity to interact with other parents, with other kids, other adults, teachers and that kind of thing. But yeah, community was huge.
I love that, because so many people, I think, today don't put enough effort into not only finding community, but creating community. And I think it's such an important aspect of life to create community around you, because you will only grow if you're in a community that is actually conducive to, fostering that growth in you. David, you're one of the few guys that I know that have 1 million kids. Okay, you don't have 1 million kids. You got 5 kids. But,
different.
With that, though, there is a sense of building community for your family and making sure that your kids have the right kind of community, especially when they're growing up, and then also continuing to encourage them, like, hey, like I remember specifically when I was growing up, my mother would always remind me that the company you keep is going to determine your level of success. Right.
Yeah, sure.
And I see a lot of kids nowadays that the company that they're in is not going to take them very far in life. Yeah. What was that like for you in terms of cultivating family life? Because you have been super busy your entire life. What was that like with you and your wife trying to cultivate a really healthy family?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Nathan. I would say that my wife was much better at being intentional with cultivating that. She didn't have it as a child, and she didn't have the community. She had a sister and a brother, and she didn't have that. So it was really important to her. And she really made a big effort to, do a number of things. One of which was we always had dinner together, and it was at 6 p.m. 6 p.m., don't be late because we're starting without you. And with 5 kids, it's like, if you're late and we start without you, good luck. You get whatever's left, So that was one aspect though, of creating community where we had time around the table. And, when the kids were younger, it was stressful. I mean, people, the kids were doing the things that kids do, licking each other's food and, poking each other and, complaining and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it was just an amazing time. I look back on the times that we had around the table, and man, I'll tell you what, I would go back in a heartbeat to be able to recreate and relive some of that time. And I have to say that I owe that part of our community and our family story to Cindy, because she was very intentional about that. And, I wished I could say, I was really intentional, but I wasn't. And if I look back on my life, the one thing that I would say, I don't know if it's a regret, but it's one thing I would do over again differently. And that is be much more intentional with the time with my kids. I'm sure that I'm harder on myself than I maybe others might be, but it's one of those things in my mind. I look back and I think, man, I really wished I would have been more intentional in a lot of different areas. But as a family, as you can imagine, we were like a pack. It's like, everywhere we went, we were like this little pack, and slowly but surely, then we kept losing pieces of our pack. And now it's just Cindy and I, and then we had to get 2 dogs just to make sure that we had a pack still.
And even then, the dogs are still wandering off.
Right? Exactly.
I think it's really, really amazing though, because I think there are a lot of people that don't realize how important that relationship is with their spouse, right? 34 years of marriage does not come easily. There's a lot of ups, there's a lot of downs, and there's a lot of figuring things out, especially, I hear so many marriages that start ending near the time of their kids going off and moving on to different stages of life, whether that's college or getting a job or moving out of the house. And so I'm curious for you, was there an intentionality behind that to have a strong relationship with your wife as these things were happening? Or were there things that maybe you did naturally that lent to that you look back now and you go, man, that if I could do that over again, or if I could share this with someone else, it would probably save a lot of pain.
I would say, again, I don't think I was very intentional with a lot of things until later in life. Honestly, I think it was because both of us had a really strong commitment to the vows that we made. And especially in Cindy's case, if you were to ask her, her parents were divorced when she was young. She was, I think, only 8 years old. And that had a huge impact on her. And she was determined that her family was going to be different. And I was committed to, my vows to her. And so we just worked it out. I don't know that we always did the best at working it out. And, interesting, I thought where you were going to go with this, and I'll just kind of share this, is that if your listeners are, in the area of age that I am, I'm going to be 60 in a month, and maybe they're getting towards the that empty nest stage. There's a whole readjustment period that Cindy and I are going through right now. And we're just working through communication and things that maybe we didn't work through that we probably should have at an earlier age. We're learning how to date again and just how to be together again. And, that's another big adjustment. And I think there's a lot of seasons of life that we have to navigate. I think that when you have some history behind you, life throws a lot at you, and that you've made it so far, and we're going to make it. It's okay. We're going to make it. No matter what comes our way, we're going to make it. We'll be okay. We just may have to work through some things.
It really is important that a lot of people take a moment in every season of their life and recalibrate. I think that's something that I've actually admired about you specifically, is that there's always a way forward. You're always going to find a solution to move forward. Yeah. And there is a compromise with those things of trying to make things work together with whether that's with a business or whether that's with someone in your family. Yeah. There is something really important to be able to stop and saying, okay, so there is no option to back out of this. We have to move forward. So what is that going to look like? My listener base is, I feel like, kind of all over the place because I have people that are older on, the other side of the mountain. I was just working with a couple this last week with my wife, and we were talking to them about, this is what you need to do right now when you're, talking about kids. You have to establish your relationship and who you are, not only as a married couple, but also separately, because we don't, I don't know about you, but my parents never told me that. I don't ever recall a time where my parents sat me down and said, Nathan, there's going to come a time in your life where you are going to have to stand up and, be your own person in your marriage and lead well. And your wife's going to do the same thing, but you're also going to have to come together and work together, even though you have disagreements. I think I knew that something like that might happen at some point, but I don't think I was ever given the instruction of like, hey, by the way, you should really get yourself put together before this whole thing happens.
It's so funny because I was always the glass half full kind of a guy. And I always remember, I even told Cindy this after we got married, like when the pastor said, for better or worse. And I'm like, for worse, what are you talking about? There's never going to be a worse. There's always a for better, it's going to be a better and then a better. And oh my gosh, if I would go back and tell my 25-year-old self something, it would be like, hey, look, just prepare for the worst because life throws you those curveballs.
Well, I laugh because I always remember my mother telling me, till death do us part. You didn't realize that it was a finish line to get to.
Right, exactly.
But it's true. There is a compromise that needs to happen. And I know for you, David, you've had a lot of trials in life. There have been a lot of difficulties. And I know a lot of people have difficulties in life, but I think you've taken a lot of time to really take a step back to analyze those trials and say, okay, what do I take from this?
Yeah,
I always remember you eat the whole thing and you spit out the bones. You try to suck out every good piece from it that you can, and then you kind of have to throw it away. Right. What were some of those pinnacle moments for you where maybe not in the moment you felt like, man, this is really good for me? Maybe you thought like, this is the end, I'm done.
Yeah.
But later
Yeah.
on, you look back in life and you go, that was a pinnacle decision in my life. That was a pinnacle
Yeah.
moment where I learned something about myself. I think specifically for you, there's something about this tenacity, this perseverance in your life to keep going.
Yeah. Gosh. I mean, it's like there's so many that are flashing through my mind because I've had a number of them, and I tend to forget them, because it's not something I think about all the time. But there's one in particular. So when we moved here to Pittsburgh, you'll recall I was telling you that we didn't know anybody. And so we were just beginning to get to know people. 11 months into living here, I lost my job. And the company that I was working for laid off a whole bunch of people across their platform. I think it was like 10,000 people across, worldwide. It was a big company. And so I was laid off, and I had just made my first house payment. We were we had moved into a townhouse and rented a townhouse first, and then we bought a house. And I made my first house payment, and it was on my son's birthday. And my wife was like, "David, where are you?" I was still at the office. And I said, "Long story, but I lost my job. And so I'm packing up and I'll be home, shortly." And it was like, oh my gosh, it was such a blow because we had picked up, I was 40 years old. We had spent 40 years in one place, in one community, picked up and moved to Pittsburgh. And in that time, in the period between, when I lost my job, it wasn't like our job market today. I mean, today, somebody loses their job, they can pick up a job in a heartbeat. It wasn't like that in 2004. So it took me a while to find a job. And through that period, I lost a lot of self-esteem. And I really was, I got into a really dark place. And there was one moment where I think Cindy and I even had a disagreement, and it just set me off. I left the house, and I actually had a plan to end my life. I knew what I was going to do, and I knew my family would be fine because I had a buttload of life insurance on me. Cindy would have been, a rich, widow, but I knew that wasn't the right thing either. And I knew that, there were people praying for me during this time. And so I just distinctly remember going to this park and kind of sitting there just stewing and not having, any self-worth and feeling like I was worthy because I had wrapped my whole identity into my work. And, long story short, I obviously, didn't do anything. I also learned that I can get through hard things and I can get through moments of crisis, even when I don't feel like I'm worthy. And so I also, through that period of time, learned that my identity is not in my work. I think that's actually a lesson that I'm probably continuing to learn. I wouldn't say I've learned it, but I'm continuing to learn because I love what I do. I get a lot of joy at helping, leaders, executives, founders to be able to have a high impact culture and growth in their companies. So, that's one example of a time in my life when I just went through a really dark time and I knew that I had to keep pressing on. And so I learned how to press on and really learned how to, kind of come back from a time when, I thought I was going to be down for the count. I'm
curious, in that darkest moment, what did you let go of in order to move forward with that? Because I find that a lot of people, and I love that you bring this up. I love this portion of your story, not because the actual content of this particular piece, because I know it's dark, but I know particular people that are still going through this today, and it's a constant battle. And when I'm talking with them, I'm always thinking there's something that this person is holding on to that they need to let go of. I think a lot of the things in life that drag us down, they're not actually attached to us. We're literally holding on to them, white knuckling them, and they're dragging us down to the sea. And so I'm curious for you, was there something in particular at that time that you let go of so that you could actually start to embrace some of the other things that were there, that were out there?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nathan. And actually the thing that really I think I let go of was my viewpoint that I was the provider. of my family and for my family. You know that I'm a man of faith. I'm a Christian. And so I, in that moment, let go of my view that I'm the provider. And I really let God be, Jehovah Jireh, God, the provider. I think it was that moment that I really began to let go of my need to control the situation, the outcomes in my life. And I say, that was a moment that I probably am still learning. Again, sometimes it's an evolution, right? I'm still God is still unlocking my fingers little by little.
It's still working you a little bit there.
Oh yeah,
like, stop
absolutely.
grabbing that. You don't need to touch that anymore.
Exactly.
I thought we got rid of that.
Yeah, no doubt, man. I think I'm better at it now than I was. But certainly I that was, the thing that came to me that I let go of.
I love that you talk about worthiness. I've heard this a number of times, even for those of you that are listening, you've heard this from past guests talking about this feeling of not feeling worthy enough. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, do you still to this day have complete peace with feeling worthy enough? Or is that something that it kind of comes back and there's a reminder that has to take place in terms of a worthiness to be where you're at, right? I think there is something to be said with, okay, we say, oh, I don't feel worthy for my car, and I don't feel worthy, with my wife, and I don't feel worthy for my job. But then there's I don't feel worthy for the breath that's in my lungs. Right. There's a large spectrum of worthiness that kind of comes into play. Is that something that you deal with and then it's completely gone forever? Or is that a constant wrestling that you have of worthiness?
Yeah, I think it's a constant. I'm not sure if it's a wrestling with worthiness, but I think it's a wrestling with my inner critic more than anything, and recognizing that God has given me certain gifts. And as I use those gifts, standing in my confidence in those gifts, I'm much better now than I was even 8 years ago when I started my coaching business, because the journey of an entrepreneur is an inside game, man. And it's, the 6 inches between my ears is probably the biggest, battleground. Right. And so I think it's more of a matter of battle with my inner critic. Like, who do you think you are? And all of these people are so much smarter than you. And, what do you have to offer? And at the same time, I've learned to be able to quiet that inner critic and remind myself that God created me for a purpose, and he put these gifts within me to facilitate conversations, to choreograph conversations and create psychological safety for organizations that ordinarily wouldn't even be engaged in these kinds of conversations. And, I'll just give you a quick example of a recent one. At the beginning of this year, I secured a contract with a law firm, and the managing partner asked me, have you ever worked with lawyers before? And I said, no. And he goes, well, I'm just telling you right now, man, they're a different breed. They're super smart. They're going to question everything. And so then I started going, oh crap, what did I get myself into? Maybe I really don't want this client. And you start, playing those mind games. But it's been one of the best things that I've ever had to do, because what I've been able to do is, in a lot of ways, coach these lawyers who ordinarily wouldn't have the space to have these kinds of conversations about leadership and about, how do we work with our associates and how do we work with managing partners and, just all of those kinds of issues. And if I didn't lean into my strengths of that facilitation, these guys wouldn't have the space to do that. And so, I just keep reminding myself that when I'm uncomfortable, it means that I'm really growing and I'm stretching myself. And I absolutely, I love it and I hate it at the same time, but it's part of the growth process.
I mean, growth is never easy, right? It's always stretching to us. And it really is important for us to stretch in those areas. And I love that you step up. I think many times, even in my own life, even with things that I am talented at, I start to second guess them sometimes. And I think that is because I allow people to plant seeds of doubt inside of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they mean well, but they plant these small little seeds of doubt. And instead of going, no, that's not it. Like, God didn't create me to be that way. Like, that's not who I am. Instead of taking those seeds and kind of throwing them out, I'm like, well, I'll get to that some other time. I'm going to go over here and work on this other thing. Or like, you just kind of ignore them. You know, we have studied under some really amazing thought leaders, people who have really done some digging into how to do growth and how to work with those limiting beliefs and, you know, the guardians of our mind that protect us. I'm curious for you. I hear a lot of noise around mindset nowadays because a lot of people talk about mindset, but I don't think a lot of people really understand how to do it. I'm curious as you're working on yourself and you're saying, you know what, man, there's this little piece that's inside of me that keeps telling me I'm not good enough. I'm maybe I shouldn't work with these lawyers. As that piece is running around in your head, what's a practical way that you actually walk through that and release that or remove that? What do you do practically in terms of addressing some of those limiting beliefs that pop up?
Man, I'm so glad you asked that, because it's one thing that I think I'm really good at, and I'm really good at being super disciplined with my routines and my rituals. My morning rituals, I think those are what saved me. And one of the things that I do in that morning time is I journal. And sometimes when I journal, I'm just talking to God, and I'm just writing, you know, random thoughts that are running through my head. Sometimes I'm writing out the things I'm thinking about, things I need to do, who I'm becoming. But I always end with at least 3 things that I'm grateful for. I've missed very few days in the last probably 7 or 8 years of journaling my gratitude. And I think if there's one thing that I can say without a doubt that helps me to overcome that imposter experience and the self-doubt and the critic, it's learning to be grateful for the things that I do have. Because when we see the things that we have, and we can be grateful for just the very gift of breath and life and sight and sound and hearing, and man, it changes our perspective so much. I think that's probably the one thing practically that I would encourage any of your listeners to just implement. And if you need journaling prompts, just think about some questions like, who am I becoming? Who do I want to become? I'm imagine myself 5 years from today. And, what did I do to get to the place where I'm at today? What were some of the high points? I just love being able to think through different, questions of who I'm becoming. So journaling, I think, is such a critical practice and something that I would encourage a lot of, all the leaders that I talk to do.
Journaling really is an important aspect of growth. There's a number of different reasons that we could go way down a rabbit trail into of why journaling is so good for you. I think a lot of people, when it comes to this idea of journaling, they're intimidated because they feel like they have to sit down and they're going to have to write a book, or they're going to have to spend, 45 minutes to an hour writing out their feelings, and it really doesn't need to be that. There really is this process of just being able to get it out of you. Because I know the writing aspect is huge. What does the review process look like for you? Because we've all, at some point, written some things down. We're like, oh yeah, that's a really great thought. I'm going to come back to that. Or this was the moment, they just finished writing. This was the moment that everything changed. Like, I have such clarity. I'm going to come back and I'm going to base my life off of this. And then you never come back and read that. Yeah. What, in terms of a routine, do you have to go back and to review that? Because one of the biggest aspects of journaling is being able to take that thought that's between that real estate between your head
Yep.
and seeing it apart from yourself. We don't ever separate those thoughts from our actual being to actually analyze them. What is that process like for you to review what you've actually written so that you can actually grow from what you've put down?
Yeah. So it all stems really from my weekly, my monthly, and my quarterly routines and rituals. And so I do a weekly review and a weekly preview. So I look at my week. I happen to use a tool called the Full Focus Planner by Michael Hyatt, and so in that rhythm, I look back and I look at my, what did I journal this week? What were some of the things that I was thinking about? What are some of the ahas or the ideas that came to me? And then I'll record any notable things in my Full Focus Planner. And if there's something that I need to like time activate, where I need to put it on my calendar, I'll put it in there, and I'll also add it to my electronic calendar. And so that review process is weekly. And I also then preview the next week and plan the next week. But then on a monthly basis, I look back and I look at the month, and I really look at like, what were my wins, and what were some of the things that I've done that were gains. And in that process then too, I'll kind of revisit those notes from my journals or my journaling. And then on a quarterly basis, I look and see, how did I do on the objectives that I set for that quarter? So that's kind of my process that I walk through. This evolved over a period of time, but definitely every week I'm going back and looking at my journaling, anything that's, significant. Some of it's just rambling, and it's okay. But some of it's, hey, I had this idea. And one thing I'm going back to a lot is in the month of July, I took a sabbatical. So I took 30 days off. So I did a lot of writing and journaling then. And as I wrote about the next season of my life and the next season of my business, there were a lot of things that I wrote down as my vision for the next season. Man, I've been going back more than once a week to those pages, really reviewing those and really marinating in those, so that vision becomes real, that I can see it in my mind, I can feel it, and I can really presence myself in that, because it's just journaling and writing words on a page if I don't go back to it. So that's something that I've been really revisiting a lot lately, because it's still so fresh.
It's so good. The clarity of vision, I think, is a huge piece that I don't think we ever really grasp that concept. I think a lot of people don't grasp it until their later years in life, until, their late 30s, maybe late 40s, something like that. We're always told like, hey, have a vision for your life, know what you want. And I think most times we get stuck in the vision of like, okay, this is what I want. I want the house. I want the car. This is the income that I want. I want the pretty girl or the pretty, handsome guy. There is this piece that we do have a vision for certain things, but I think oftentimes we don't actually envision and we don't actually plan for who we want to be, who we're going to show up as in those moments of life. In the next, 10 years of your life, what kind of husband are you going to be to Cindy? What kind of dad are you going to be stepping into the shoes for your kids? And I think a lot of people don't actually spend time presencing. I love that you said that, I want to presence myself, because presence is really important. We know presence like in the present tense, right? We walk into a room and my presence is here, but we don't ever extend that presence out to the future of what do we really want in our life? How do we want to show up? In this next season for you, David, because you've had this massive amount of reflection of what you want in this next season of life, and you're going back and you're reviewing this weekly, which, by the way, I love that you said weekly review and preview, because I'm gonna steal that, and I hope that everyone listening, you steal that too, because it's an important aspect. But I'm curious, what are you presencing yourself for right now? Like, what are you envisioning the future so clearly that you're not actually going to be that in the future, but you're actually going to start living that out today?
Yeah, that's such a great question. The biggest thing for me is not looking for things, but looking for experiences and presencing myself in experiences with other people. I think I've got to the place in my life where I could care less about cars. I could care less about houses. I could care less about, a lot of the things in life, because I've lost both of my parents and I know what it's like to go through those things. And honestly, most times they just get thrown away. And so it really doesn't matter. What does matter are the people that you get to impact. I'm really presencing myself to really be a mentor and a coach for emerging leaders all over the world, because one of the things that I recognized just not too long ago is that I have a passion for emerging leaders because I was one. My dad, I was an emerging leader, in my dad's organization, but he didn't really know how to help me grow and lead me and groom me as his successor. I got thrown into the fire. When he died, man, I had to do depositions. I had to do all kinds of stuff that I was ill prepared for. And so I don't want that to happen to other leaders. And I will just say this, that there are a lot of baby boomers who are getting ready to retire. They're going to sell their business. Maybe they don't think they're going to sell their business, or they're not going to retire, but at some point you're checking out, man. I mean, we don't get a free pass on this life, and they're not ready to hand it off to the next generation of leaders or to whoever's going to come behind them. And so my passion is to help leaders like that to prepare, and to prepare not just the next level of leaders, but also to prepare themselves at what's next for them. Because that's the one thing that you asked about what I'm presencing. One of the things I'm presencing is being someone who is willing to slow down. Man, I'm a full force, Mach 3 hair on fire kind of a guy. I love going fast. It's part of my nature. But I tell you, Nathan, I'm learning to slow down, and I'm learning the value of slowing down. Just, with my sabbatical, it just really struck me that there's so much, it's the Ferris Bueller line, right? If you don't slow down, you're going to miss what's going on around you, kind of a thing. And I know that that's something that I'm going to be better at, and I'm presencing, in the moment is learning to slow down.
I love that you say that you were talking about presencing and what you're putting forth in terms of who you want to be. And I love that fact of slowing down currently right now. There's so many people, whether you are on the earlier side of your career, or if you're on the latter side of your career, it doesn't matter where you are. You got to slow down.
Yeah, for sure.
We're finding such fatigue and burnout in every industry with people that are going so hard. They're never taking breaks. I always remember, I don't think it was my parents, but I would almost attribute it to them saying, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Actually, I'm pretty sure my mother actually does say that. I'll sleep when I'm dead. No. You don't sleep when you're dead. That's how you're going to get dead.
You're going to get
you don't
dead.
want to get
exactly.
dead, then you got to sleep, right?
Right.
And
exactly.
it really is so important right now with a lot of the stuff that I'm reading from experts of slowing down, of getting rest, of not speeding through your meal, taking a breath. And not, hyperventilating, right. There are so many things in life. There are these warning lights. You're driving in your car and all of a sudden you get the gas light comes up and you're like, okay, I got to go get gas. And then all of a sudden the engine light comes on. And you're like, well, that's kind of strange. And then all of a sudden the entire board lights up and you're like, oh, Christmas has come early. I'm going to have to pay for a lot of things. Right.
Yes. Right.
But in a lot of people's lives right now, the lights are going off and they've been flashing for a while. They're saying, check engine, check oil. And people are blowing through them and they're ignoring them. I envision the guy that puts the, tape or the cardboard over that one section of their dashboard that says, well, if I can't see it, it doesn't exist, right? It
doesn't exist, right?
Well, it does exist and it will happen. And sooner or later that engine's going to blow and you don't get another engine in this life.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I love that you say that because many people, because they are on this trying to get on a fast track towards something, the fast track isn't worth it. At the end of your life, slowing down, spending those times with your family, with kids, developing relationships with friends and community, those truly are some of the greatest things that we need to keep in mind. We've talked about so many things, David, and I absolutely love this conversation. It's so good. I want to ask you one more question here before we kind of end. Before we do, I want to encourage all of you listening. I want you to go find David McGlennon on Instagram. You can find him really easily. It's super simple. Just search for D McGlennon, or you can also find him, his podcast, which is also, by the way, amazing. Go check that out, In the Growth Space. You can find that also on Instagram. If you want to reach out and connect with him and talk with him about bringing him into your company and working with your emerging leaders, you can actually go to his website, davidmcglennon.com. That's David, McGlennen.com. Earlier, you were talking about identity and how your identity was lost when it was attached to your job.
Yeah.
And that really resonates with me right now. I have a couple friends who I was just talking with, even within the past couple of weeks, and they're in their 50s and 60s, and they just lost their job. And they're going, what in the world am I going to do? Like, I was close to retirement, and now I don't even know if that's an option now. Their entire identity has been wrapped up in their job for so long that they can't see anything else. And maybe they're thinking dark thoughts. Maybe they're allowing themselves to go to places they shouldn't.
Yep.
I'm curious for you, what would you say to the person who has their identity wrapped up in things, in jobs, in positions, and all these things that are so easily ripped away, right? Like even tomorrow, just it could be gone.
Yep.
What would you say to that person that is currently going through that as an encouragement to say, hey, you know what? This isn't your life. Your life is so much more than your position in your job.
Yeah, I think, one of the things, there's an exercise that I went through with one of our mentors that really helped me to create the identity that I wanted. I think and essentially it's, you talk about anything that comes after the words I am is attributed to your identity. I am a father. I am a husband. I am a vice president. I would look at those things that you're telling yourself right now. And if you're wrapped up, if your identity is wrapped up in your business, your career, I would look at the things that are outside of that and begin to rehearse to yourself, what are you? I am a dad. I am a father. I'm a very productive human being. I am worthy. They're all of those kinds of things that you can help rehearse in your mind. And so I would say to start with that to begin. But secondly, I think get a hobby, find a hobby, and to be very honest, I'm looking for a new hobby because one of the things that the years that I've been, doing racing and working out is starting to wear on the body. And so I'm looking for other ways to stay in shape physically and then also do some other things that are more creative. I still work out an awful lot. And that's one thing that I just love to do because I know that the health of my body is what's going to carry me forward into my next 20 or 30 years, God willing. So you asked about, people that are wrapped up in their career and their identity is in their work. Find a hobby and find some other thing outside of yourself that you can invest your time in. And I would also say there was a question that popped in my mind as you were kind of painting that picture of your friends that had lost their job. And the coach in me starts to come out, and I like to ask good questions. And the question that popped into my head was, what does this make possible for you? What does losing your job make possible for you? For me, it was a process, but what it made possible for me was being a part of a startup company and learning how to really be a leader. And I learned to rely on myself. I learned to increase my skills, my sales skills, my organization skills. And that's what losing my job made possible for me. And so I just love that question about what does it make possible for you? Because too often times we get in these dark places and we think that we don't have any options. And really what that question does is it releases the blinders and it really helps us to see what are the possibilities.
I'm so glad that you guys are listening to this, because this is just pure wisdom being just spilled out right now. As you were talking about the I am statements, and I love that you bring that up. There's a really cool portion of scripture where Moses is asking, it's Moses in the burning bush, right? And he's asking,
who should I say that sent me?
And who should I say that sent me? And who does God say that he is? He says, I'm Jehovah, which means I am. And people are like, wait, I am what? Like, I'm what? Like, give me the rest of it. Like, and he's saying, no, I am, I exist. I think it is truly an amazing question. What does this make possible going through the situation right now? Whatever it is that you're going through, whether that's a loss of a job or a loss of a family member or a loss of anything, what does this make possible right now in your life? It makes it possible for you to live into more of who God called you to be. And we have to define who that is. You can't go to anyone else. This isn't a thing that you go to a book and the book goes, oh, Nathan, this is who you are. And I'm like, man, why didn't I read this book 10 years ago? This would have been amazing, right? It's not how it works. You do the work like David was talking about earlier of going and doing some reflective journaling, spending some time setting it up, doing a preview and a review, but you're also asking yourself those questions. In this time where I am right now, what has God freed me up from so that I could actually move forward and be more of who he created me to be? Because there are things I think in life that you and I have not been able to be because of our job, because of certain circumstances.
Yeah, that's right.
And God just opened up a door and said, guess what? I've taken that away from you. I've taken it off your plate. Now I'm calling you to step up into the shoes that I called you into be. Man, that is so good. I don't even think we could end on a better note. Brother, I want to thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate you coming on and pouring amazing stories out, wisdom. And I know everyone listening is also going to get that same benefit just from listening to what you had to say. I appreciate you being a good friend. I love that you are bigger on the inside than you are on the outside. And I think many people could definitely benefit from that. So reach out, connect to David. Absolutely great person to have in your corner. For those of you that are listening, share this episode with a friend. Someone in your life is going through something and they need to hear the words that David said. Someone needs to actually hear from someone like David to say, hey, slow down and write out what it is that you really, really want. Write out who it is that you are. Share this episode with a friend. Like this episode. Subscribe to the podcast so you can catch the next ones that are coming out. I always want to remind you, be more, see more, and experience more together.